Hello and welcome once again to episode 132 of Code Completion. We're a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
So, as always, we have a new. I hesitate to say batch because there's just one new proposal in the run. But we have a new Swift evolution proposal, and that is expanding on our favorite thing, variadic generics, with tuple of value pack expansion. This sounds complicated, but it basically means that you can use variadic generics with tuples and do sensible things with them, like use them as function arguments and return values and stuff like that. So yeah, it's needed. That's all I can say.
Yeah, it seems like it's just rounding out the feature set that's going to be coming out with these packs. So that's cool. Just more. I mean, that's what would suck is I guess this, to me seems a little bit like SwiftUI version 1, where it's like there were very obviously things lacking that just made things either super hard to do or impossible. Obviously, this is at a lower level, but trying to get as much as they can in for like potentially version 1 of these the packs is a good idea. So
Yeah.
someone saw that was missing and they added it. So that's cool.
Yeah, and it's something that like we're gonna get more and more of as people gain experience as to what is missing. And for everyone kind of thinking, well, this variadic generic stuff sounds very complicated, you might actually end up using it earlier than you think. So I told Spencer this, but about a week ago I started a new little project of mine, and I immediately felt myself reaching for something like variadic generics because it would just make some super boilerplatey code a way nicer to have something like that. So I think that a lot of us are going to end up wanting something like this very soon. And it's just something that we're going to need to get used to little by little because it does have a whole bunch of new syntax, which I'm probably going to get wrong. Like, how many of us were totally confused by the where clauses in Swift when they first kind of got littered all over the place, right? Now we're going to have repeat and each clauses all over, and it's like, what do these mean? But hopefully the compiler can help us out, at least at the learning stage where we're kind of figuring out where we want to use these things. And like that will be something that we're definitely going to see a lot of at WWDC in a month or two. So that's exciting. On the topic of exciting news, it seems that Apple came out with new software, which is fairly rare nowadays. But they have new versions of Final Cut Pro and Logic available for iPad.
Yeah. They're going to be coming out on the 23rd of May. So
Soon.
yeah, probably. Yeah. Like a week from now or so. Yeah, it's cool to, I mean, my position is a little bit different where it's basically a competitor to my livelihood. So that's interesting. So from my side, I've sort of been looking at, what other people are saying as compared to LumaFusion because I want to keep my job and I hope that I don't think that this will tank us or anything. I mean, it's sort of like the same thing. I don't know how long ago it was, a few months ago when DaVinci came out for iPad and stuff. So, and we're doing fine still. So, I guess the thing with Final Cut obviously is it's from Apple, so that makes a difference. Although there are some really nice things and some sort of caveats, like from my perspective, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
It only works on higher end iPads, as far as
Yeah.
I'm aware, like M1 or up iPads.
Yep.
So there's that. It does have things that we don't have, like live drawing, and that's pretty cool. You can draw and write, directly on whatever your media is, and kind of annotate, I guess, which is cool. Um, so yeah, but they've got things like multicam editing, which we just came out with. Not that we're the only ones with it or anything, but So like it's very comparable. I think there's sort of some back and forths, at least from my probably slightly biased perspective. Um, but yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's got a lot of graphics, and that's cool, and it does some ML stuff. Like I forget what they called it. Like removing
The background chroma
the
key.
backgrounds, like you can do, yeah. With photos and stuff, and in the Photos app and stuff. So it's cool. And then I don't really know much about Logic, but that's cool
It does
as
music
well.
stuff, right? That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
all I know.
Um, that seems a little bit harder to do music stuff on an iPad than video editing because if you need to hook up a MIDI controller, well, I guess you could probably do that, but seems like audio engineers, stack of devices that they use are more complex. Like, I mean, they buy Mac Pros just so they can have the PCIe expandability and stuff and put whatever cards and stuff they need. So I don't know how popular that'll be, but I can imagine that they probably had a fair amount of their library that they could just port over and maybe just build on UI. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Th-
I mean, it's exciting. It's exciting to get competition and also a little bit scary, but I think overall it's a cool thing for sure. Oh, it is a subscription too.
Yeah,
I should
that's what I was
mention
gonna
that.
mention. So,
Yeah,
it's what's most interesting about this is like some of Apple's first subscription software, where Final
yeah.
Cut Pro and Logic have traditionally been, I think, $300 for Final Cut Pro. I don't know about Logic.
I think
Um,
it's 199 or something.
yeah, but that's like a
Recently.
permanent license
Yeah,
for updates in perpetuity,
yeah,
which makes sense for a piece of software that not a lot of people use. You have to make it expensive, and it has to be something that can win them over, especially when Final Cut Pro or Final Cut X burned so many bridges base from Final Cut 7, which
yes,
was a great departure in UI and capability.
yes,
So this seems like it's just as great a departure, right? And it's not like they want to win over the people that are using Final Cut Pro on their computers. They
Mhm.
more want to win over the new generation of folks that need something better than iMovie,
Mhm.
right? And want to dip their toes in something more complex than GarageBand, but also don't necessarily have the equipment or the budget to shell out
Sure,
for like a
that's fair.
full editing rig. And as with most of this Apple software, what's most likely to happen is instead of being a competitor to something like LumaFusion, it ends up being a benefactory in some way because Apple's not going to iterate and get all the features that everyone needs as quickly as
Yeah, true.
smaller independent development shops, and they're going to be able to pick up the slack where Apple is not, right? And because they're bringing new customers to the space, then there's more people to recommend these other products too. So I think in that sense, it's kind of beneficial to everyone. We'll see if, and Apple has traditionally not pulled shenanigans on the App Store to kind of like promote its stuff over other stuff.
Oh, yeah,
So like hopefully that's not going to start today, right?
yeah,
Um, that would royally suck because there's no other option for something like LumaFusion other than being on the App Store
yeah,
currently. We'll see soon, but that's the current status quo. So that I would say that's kind of really interesting about all this.
yeah, for sure. I agree. I think, yeah, between the limited device compatibility and the subscription, like it's a lot less worrying to me now than when I first saw the headline. I was like, oh crap. Uh, so, yeah, it'll we'll see in the coming weeks and months and stuff. And I'm surprised and pleasantly surprised that DaVinci didn't really do anything to us when it came out. So, and that was free, I think,
Hmm.
right? Yeah.
Well,
So
they're hoping you buy their hardware too, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, everyone's got an angle for sure.
Yeah, and I can definitely see this too being geared like Final Cut Pro is kind of geared towards YouTubers. Like that's probably where most of their users
Yeah,
are.
that's fair.
Surprisingly enough, and the rest of them are on Premiere, right? So if Apple can help convince any of those Premiere folks, hey, you have an iPad, right? You have a Windows computer. We got that
Yeah.
out of the way. But you probably also have an iPad because that's kind of the best tablet around. Why don't you give this a try and see how it fits into your workflow? And if not needing to necessarily fiddle around with the keyboard and mouse makes you faster in any way, then why not? It's a perfectly great way to interact with many types of UIs, right? So that's what I'm thinking Apple's probably targeting, is that kind of segment of the market, or trying to satisfy them, right?
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, Apple does not necessarily care to sell software; they care to sell more hardware, and that's where their juice is. So, I think this is a step in that direction, right?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, I think.
Yeah, and I would say the last piece that's really interesting about all this is this was actually leaked. It was leaked for the wrong date.
Yes.
The date that it was leaked was much later. But apparently, the leaker kind of got found out based on that key information, because I think it was their girlfriend or something was the employee at Apple
I think
that
it's their
had leaked
sister,
it.
yeah.
Oh, sister, right. And therefore that information is now known by Apple. I think that employee has been terminated,
Yep.
and the next step is probably legal pittance at this point. So,
Yeah.
as you've heard us say several times before, like, it kind of sucks when these big companies kind of go after the little person, whether it's Nintendo going after people that are building hacks and stuff, or
Yeah.
it's like going after the leaked copy of the game and who leaked it and all that. Like, yeah, there are repercussions for those companies that are much larger than someone stealing stuff from a Joe Schmo, right? Like, there's quite literally millions of dollars in the running there that they're worried about. At the same time, that person that did leak the thing does not have millions of dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's kind of deeply unbalanced there. But like, I can see the case for an example being set from like a law perspective, like, hey, we can't do these sorts of things. Like, it's not allowed in our society. But like, I can definitely see the unbalance there. And maybe we just need different laws that kind of support the individual person a lot better than these giant corporations that are, oh, I'm so sorry that they're hurt. It's one thing if they're going out of business, but if they're wildly successful, then like that's a very different case. And maybe this is the only thing that's holding piracy from going completely out of control, is setting these examples. But I'm gonna kind of stage a bet in that it's not. Like, I just think that most people are decent and they are not kind of in it to ruin the system for everyone, and are willing to give money several times, Spencer and Dimitri, to certain companies that they don't necessarily agree with.
Oh man.
But like, that's the thing that gets me, is like, there are plenty of people who are willing to do the right thing, enough to make up for the people that don't have the means, right? There's only one reason why you're going to be pirating something, and that's because you're 16 and you don't have a job, you don't have the ability to get the thing anyways, right? And it's one thing if you're building a company around like ruining leeching off of a different company, right? Like, I can guess the closest thing to that is Corellium, I think they're called, emulating iOS to kind of find security exploits, which Apple recently lost that case. So in extreme irony, when an individual does it, that's a no-no, but when a big company does it, that's good business, right? So like, that's where I feel like our system of laws is kind of not keeping up with the reality of the situation, right? So we'll see. Today's vigilante and Peter Panism of making a game available or making a piece of information available widely before a company wants it, like maybe that should not be an offense with 30 years of jail time or however many millions of dollars of future income attached to it when you are an individual, right?
Yeah,
But that's just me.
definitely. No, I agree. I mean, it's uh, interesting how they kind of did it, where they like leaked specific information to specific people that was wrong, and so they could determine who was leaking the information. Um, but this kind of stuff also sucks because, like, uh, in a very sort of, I guess, shallow sense, like Johnny won't be on the podcast anymore because he works at Apple now, and like that kind of sucks. Like, I get it, I totally get it, because like you don't want to even between friends leak anything, let alone like on a podcast because you work there. So um, we're down a code completionist just because of that. Just because
Mm-hmm.
Apple is particularly sensitive and potentially litigious about this stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's not to say like, hey, if you work at Apple does not mean you can't have friends, right? We
Of
still talk
course,
with Johnny. We still like
yes,
have fun conversations with him, especially about Zelda, right?
yes, about Zelda.
We're not talking to him about stuff at Apple, and we're not
Yeah,
asking
yeah,
him for like what are your thoughts about this? We're not poking and prodding because
right.
that puts him in an incredibly awkward situation. So if you do know people that work at Apple, like respect the fact that they can't and they might really want to share, but they really shouldn't. And any little hypothetical devil in the shoulder is not going to help them, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
as was probably the case in this situation, right? The person that worked at Apple was probably incredibly excited about what they were working on, and was not in it to get a kickback or anything. And
Right.
someone else preyed on that, like straight and simple. Because one person was getting a benefit out of working at Apple, an income. The other one was not. And they found a way to get some benefit, 5 minutes of fame, and then that quickly turned out to not work out for them. So, like, it's not the right time to play Peter Pan, I guess, and maybe it will never be. But I still think it sucks if Apple does choose to go after these people
Yeah.
beyond terminating their
Firing. Yep.
employment, right? Like that's they've already done a lot. And those two are already probably not going to do this again. Like they've learned their lesson. And it's a complete different thing if they just continue this behavior, right?
Sure.
But like at this point, I would say that is probably enough. And same to Nintendo going after. I forget what the person did, but they made it very easy to like pirate software, right?
Yeah, I think the whole thing was like they made it really easy for custom firmware to be loaded on the Switch, which I think then allowed other tools like being able to export a ROM from the
Cartridges and stuff.
cartridge or whatever, or import them as well and install them. I don't know if the software he made specifically like they I don't know if they wrote the software to do that, but I'm fairly sure that it was just allowing you to basically load custom firmware. I could be wrong though.
You got it. No, that makes sense. Um, but yeah, like to go after one individual with that kind of
Yeah.
penalty seems rigid, and it's something that I think we as society need to think about and potentially change, especially around copyright. Right? It's like such a fragmented and broken piece of our current civilization that I think
Yeah,
it
and
definitely
then
needs change because the only ones who benefit are giant corporations and never individuals, which it was made to protect. So
yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say, and then Disney kind of like says F you to copyright and like still gets their a lot of well, they're trying to, keep Mickey Mouse copyrighted and stuff. And it's like, okay.
yeah,
So
and the music industry, they also like
yes.
royally ruined everything, because now nothing enters the public domain anymore. I don't know if anyone's noticed that, but there is a whole segment of our civilization that's just kind of locked behind a paywall for some company to profit off of, which is kind of ridiculous. But in any case, there are other things that are quite exciting to get excited about, and that is that the new headset that Apple has reportedly been working on may come in like a month.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. Ming Chi Kuo says that Apple is well prepared for the headset announcement at DubDub. So that's pretty crazy. And he kind of talks about the price of the headset probably being around $3,000, and that cost being represented by its or he says the components represent its most expensive material costs in his view. So that includes 4K micro OLED displays, dual M2 based processors, so probably not straight M2s, but in same silicon. The headset casing, 12 optical cameras for tracking hand movements. That's pretty crazy. And an external power supply. So that sort of those are the contributors to that price. So John Gruber on it's a Daring Fireball post says that like he kind of makes the comparison between the 1984 original Macintosh, and it cost $2,500, which in today money is about $7,500. So in that sense, if it's amazing, it's not absurd for $3,000 is what he says. So that's like an interesting perspective where I wasn't around for sort of those older Macintoshes, but computers were a lot more expensive back in the day. It seems like, at least. So people may pay for it, and they're talking about that they're trying to sort of aim it at developers, content creators, and professionals rather than general consumers. And Apple expects to sell just one headset per day per retail store. So like that's kind of an interesting perspective, where it's not like people are flying out the door with MacBook Airs all day, every day. Probably their target, I suppose, is pretty low for this first generation of whatever this headset ends up being.
I guess that target of one per day per retail store gets me thinking, how many of these are they going to have like on display for people to try, right?
It's a good point.
Because if there's like just one table with like 6 of them, right? Then it's not something that people can look over the shoulder and kind of check out as well. It's you're experiencing it and no one else really is. So that's going to be an interesting thing that they're going to need to play around with. And I guess they got some of this experience with the watch, right? It's so small that no one's really looking over their shoulders to kind of see. But it's not a very social device, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to get people to kind of try it out and leave the store with one, because the people who want it, they're not going to go to the store and get it. They're just going to order it online. So it's like, what exactly do they aim to be like selling at the store, right? It's the people who are kind of learning about it then and there and who have a hole in their wallet, I guess, right?
Yeah, and like just thinking about them probably like having to clean the headset every time someone uses it and stuff, like.
And they were originally doing that with the watches, and then now it's just kind of like, hey, here's the table with the watches, have fun, right?
Yeah, it seems a little bit more fine on the wrist, but when it's like you're breathing into this thing, basically, it's like that's kind of gross.
It's okay. COVID is over. It's been officially.
Oh yeah,
it's no longer a thing. If you're seen with a mask
exist
outside, people have the entitlement to tell you now COVID is over.
Well, yeah, this is America. Come on, man.
To be clear, I fully endorse still wearing a mask, and I want to make that super duper 100% clear. COVID is not over. A lot of people that I know just recently caught it. Nice. So like, let's not pretend it's over. It's still debilitating for a lot of people. It still kills a lot of people. And it can leave you disabled. And the scariest way possible mentally. Which is like the way I do not want to live the rest of my life, which is probably gonna be
Yeah.
prolonged by medicine and like our like ability to prolong life in general, right? It's just gonna get longer and longer, and I don't want that longer and longer to be filled
Worse
with
and worse.
worse and worse. So I am still like a person who wears a mask when I go out, especially so that I have a newborn child that does not have a working immune system. So I
Fair.
want to encourage everyone, hey, if you can and if you don't mind wearing a mask, wear a mask. The person who came and installed fiber, he's like, hey, do you want me to wear a mask? I'm totally A-okay doing that. And it's like, yes, if you can, like, please
That's
do.
cool.
Like, the fact that people are still very open to doing that, like, warms your heart in a way, right?
Yeah.
It gives you hope for humanity when there's like so little of it left. So I just want to share that.
Yeah. No, that's actually really cool. I was out shopping for clothes for my sister's wedding with my family yesterday, or with my mom and my brother. We weren't wearing masks, but I'll usually wear a mask if it's like pretty populated area. But we were just in like a clothing store with like two other people. But the guy at the counter was wearing a mask. I was like, "Hey, that's like the first time I've seen someone wear a mask in a long, long time in just like a normal place." So that was cool.
Mm-hmm. On the topic of things that seem like counterproductive to everything, the Maryland Apple Store Union wants to allow the employees that work at the Apple Store to ask for tips. And this seems like we're going even more backwards.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because they feel like they're not being paid enough. Tipping is not the answer to that, though. Tipping is a tool that companies use to pay people less, not pay people more. So it's very weird that the union is pushing for this, even though like Apple would never like want this, which is
No.
even weirder.
Not to mention like it's talking about, I think it says like a 3, 5 or a custom amount, 3 or 5% tip or a custom amount. That's like,
Okay, I'm going to pause you. The percentage thing is like one thing, but you go to a coffee shop and it's like, do you want to tip $1, $2, or $3? Your drink was $4. You're going to be tipping
okay,
60% by tapping the $3
right.
button.
No, I know.
Like,
But you tip like 5% on like a $5,000 Mac Pro, and it's like, that's a lot of money, dude. That's a huge freaking tip. And it goes into a pool. You don't just like pay directly the tip directly the person that helped you. It goes into a pool, and it's like based on
how else is the
hours
manager
worked.
going to get tips, Spencer?
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, anyway, I'm not like against tips, right? Like I definitely at least tip 20% when I go to a restaurant or whatever. But like it seems weird to do this at like an Apple store. It's like, Apple could pay you more money, dude. Come on. They're asking for like some good stuff, like a 10% raise and stuff. But like, yeah, the tip thing is like, this seems a little interesting.
I think tips have gone more and more pervasive in weirder and weirder ways.
For sure.
Like
Yes.
ever since everyone is using the same like payment terminals like Clover, then it's just like a part of the thing. So why not have tip on every screen for anything? I'm buying clothes. Would you like to tip me? It's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
at which point is it a tip or you're just like paying their wages, right?
Yeah.
And it's incredibly awkward because everyone can see you tipping. If you have any sort of good income, you feel indebted to tip because like at which point like am I too good to not tip this person who does not necessarily have the same like benefits that I've had like getting to my point in my career and them and theirs? Like it's a very bizarre thing that we still have this, and it's very American centric. Like it does not exist in other countries. And then there's the awkward, like, when should you tip and when should you not tip? Like when you go to the hotel, do you leave the cleaning lady a tip or not? Or cleaning person, right, I should say. Like, is that something that you do or you don't? It's super ambiguous. Because we have a tipping culture that is just kind of whatever. And now it's even more whatever. So like I don't endorse this at all. I think if anything, there are a few stores and restaurants that I've been to that actively say, "Hey, do not tip. We pay our
That's
employees
good.
well." In fact, you can see how well we pay our employees because we say we're now hiring for $30 an hour, and that's great. That's a great way of making people not feel bad that they're not tipping at a restaurant because they can directly see like what people are getting paid to do their job. And it turns out when they're being paid well, they do their job well, and you don't have to have tips. And for
Yeah.
anyone that's listening that's not American, the reason why you have tips is because in some states, the minimum wage for service industry is like $2 an hour, which is
Yep.
stupid.
That's
And
how it is in Utah.
tip
That's why I'm
it
always
is it.
like, yeah, yeah. I had a friend that worked at a restaurant in high school, and we'd go to the restaurant to hang out with him and get food from him and stuff when he was working. And yep, he got paid. It was like $2.50 an hour. So
Yikes.
that's why I always will tip at restaurants because I know they don't get paid anything. It's just like I don't know if it's like a state thing or a
It's
county
very
thing or
much a state
whatever.
thing. In California, it's not. It's the
Yeah.
minimum wage. Whatever regular minimum wage is, all
Oh.
service industry also gets that same minimum wage.
Yeah, no service. Yeah,
Um,
in Utah, it's awful. But that's where I'm like, yeah, obviously I'm going to tip you. Like, otherwise you're making literally nothing. So, yeah, it's a bummer for sure.
mhm.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird culture for sure, though.
I think the weirdest one is when companies don't want you to tip, but they also staple on a 16% service fee. It's like just add it to
It's
the
the same
prices.
thing. Yeah,
Or another favorite, when they tax the food. Food is not taxable. Don't tax the food. You tax the
yeah,
drinks, not the food. But no one knows that, so they just start adding the tax on the food as well. So it's like, mm, there's just so
yeah,
much to unpack that no one knows how these laws work. They just like adding percentages all over the place for a menu price that people don't even look at anymore. Like,
yep.
I don't know about you. If you go to the semi decent sushi place, you're not gonna decide which fish to get based on the price. You're not gonna look.
You've
You're gonna
you've
get what
already
you want to
mentally
get.
prepared yourself. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's like there's very little point to all of these hidden fees. If anything, all these hidden fees have caused people to not bother looking at the price, and then they just get surprised at the final bill, or don't ever look at it and then wonder why they have no money. Which is also another thing people do because credit cards
yeah.
exist and you're not counting the
That's
cash right in
fair.
front.
Yeah,
So yeah, this whole system is kind of like out of control. I don't think the Maryland Apple Store Union is going to improve this in any way by like forcing Apple to allow their employees to ask for tips. Um, if anything, like Apple stores work so well because there's no commission, there's no pressure to get people to like sell stuff. And people are happier for that. You go into Apple Store to learn and not necessarily go out with a brand new car that you didn't want, right? And that is why Apple has been so successful. So for them to not realize this is incredibly short sighted, to say the least.
yeah. Um, yeah, the article talks a little bit more about some other benefits that they're trying to push for, which seem definitely a lot more reasonable. Like
Mm-hmm.
I said, overall raises. I think it's a 10% raise. Um,
Vacations,
yeah, way more
benefits.
vacation, bereavement leave, benefits, higher pay
That's all
over
reasonable.
holidays. Yeah, of course. Like that, we're not saying that that's any of this is a bad thing, but the tipping is just like kind of a weird. Like I
It's
don't know
like
if it
one of
was like
those
a
laws that get shoehorned in with all the rest.
exactly.
It's like,
Yeah,
why?
yeah.
What's the grand plan
So
here? Why is this going to be a thing that is going to impact things in 10 years and no one's going to realize how it got in?
yeah. So anyway,
On the topic of things that no one wanted to get in, it seems like the Go compiler, this is a compiler that runs on your terminal, is going to be tracking your compilations in some way. Sorry, I didn't mean to say tracking. Adding telemetry. Um, Basically
big
tracking
big
what you're
difference.
compiling
Yeah,
to see if you use certain features because they claim it will help people fix bugs that
yeah,
no one is complaining about. Like they said, they had a bug
yeah,
no one's complaining about. Maybe no one's using it. Maybe that's the problem. But got to add telemetry.
yeah. It's interesting. They talk about there was some issue that happened in 2020 or so that no one reported the bug over 3 years, and then they found it when they were working on something else. So like that seems like to be their impetus for wanting to do this, which is like, okay, well, if no one reported it for 3 years, then probably not an issue, like Dimitri said, or not big enough to, I don't know. Anyway, uh, yeah, that's super interesting, and it talks about like they'll. It's kind of weird, like they're you have like under a 2% chance of getting sort of flagged to report this whatever configuration you're using, which means probably like less than once a year that you'll actually be sending telemetry, but it gets rounded up into a daily report that people can view, or I don't know who can view, but it says the server publishes the each day's reports in full, and publishing tabular and graphical summaries, based on whatever your configuration is. So kind of a weird thing. I mean, it talks about Audacity, GitLab, and Homebrew have adopted telemetry in the past, and like seems to be generally accepted, it says, but and it mentions VS Code also having detailed telemetry and it not having stopped it from being used by 74% of developers. Holy crap, that's a lot of people.
It's just the default now.
I know.
Yeah.
So
it's a hot piece of garbage if you've never used VS Code before.
Yeah, I don't.
This is how I know. If you scroll, the scrolling is not the same as scrolling anywhere on the system.
This is the
it's
worst,
just ever so slightly off, and it's like I don't know how that doesn't bother people. Like, it nearly almost made me motion sickness. I'm not joking. Like, I get car sick very easily, and that almost made me car sick. Looking at a screen, scrolling something, just because it was
awesome.
ever so slightly different than what my brain is used to. And my brain is convinced I ate something poisonous at that point. Which I guess is true. I'm using something poisonous on my computer screen. So if you find yourself the need to use any sort of editor for web development, go check out Nova by Panic. This is not sponsored.
Yay.
It is a way better app. Yes, it crashes constantly if you get it into a certain state with TypeScript. Ask me how I know. I send them love messages every time it happens, because it usually happens in like batches, where it's like I type something that it's unhappy about, and like anything I do within that hour time frame is just going to make it upset. Usually when I'm refactoring like something big. So doesn't happen all the time. And once it starts crashing, it'll like crash dozens of times, one after another. So I usually like write them a poetry. I don't know. Something to entertain them, hopefully give them clues as to what on earth is going on.
That's good.
Because at a certain point, I'm not doing anything. It's just like typing and it crashes. Like, well,
yeah.
Here I am typing again. How's your day? Like, there's nothing. I don't want to be mean to them. And I fully support everyone give them a try, because that is still better than VS Code. Like, I'm not getting motion sickness. I'm just getting better memory because I now remember exactly what code I wanted to write because it went poof 4 times. So if anything, it's improving me. That's how much I love Panic, is I'm willing to accept the shortcoming of their software crashing every now and then for random reasons, over the piece of garbage that is VS Code. So yeah, I don't know what kind of endorsement that was. Panic, I love you. You make cool stuff. Please fix that crash. I sent you plenty of reports. Hopefully they're useful.
That's awesome.
This week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Pennant. Calling all sports fans. Want to keep track of the season, but there's so many teams and not enough time? Check out Pennant. Pennant provides sports standings at a glance. Pennant displays league standings as a simple bar chart where the best teams rise to the top throughout the season. Of course, you can dig in deeper with team stats, game results, and more. Version 10 introduced the all-new customizable My Pennant view, where you can build a wide selection of visualizations for any sport, division, or team. Unlock Pennant Premium to add as many blocks as you'd like, and put any of them on your home screen as a widget. Whether you follow MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, or MLS, Pennant has you covered, with more sports and leagues coming soon. Thank you so much for Pennant for sponsoring Code Completion. Download Pennant on the iOS App Store today. So, Spencer, I've got a Code Completion tip for you. and it's
All right.
about Swift enums, because Swift enums are the best. If you haven't heard, other languages, I don't know if you've heard TypeScript, have things called enums. In fact, TypeScript has a thing called an enum that doesn't even exist in the language. It's just kind of like the documentation literally says you probably don't want to use these, but just in case JavaScript adds them, we have them here, so that way your code can transition well.
Oh,
So total band-aid. But these enums in Swift, they're amazing. And they're amazing for a completely different reason as of Swift 5.3. And that is you can have them be comparable for free. It turns out it was a pain pre-Swift 5.3 to make them comparable if they weren't like an integer-based enum.
right.
Because then it's like, well, how is it comparable? But in Swift 5.3, the order you define them in, that can be the order. If they have associative values, that can be part of the order. All you have to do is make your enum conform to comparable, and that's all you need to do. And then you have comparable enums, which are super useful in a whole sorts of variety of situations. Now, not all enums need to be comparable. Like if you have north, south, east, west, those don't have any sort of order, right? So it's not comparable by default. You do
Sure.
need to opt into it, but the compiler will do the rest for you, and basically write code that will make it comparable for you. So that's my tip for this week.
Very nice. Yeah, I was reading the article that you linked, and we'll put it in the description. It looks really cool. I've never used it yet, but it has some cool examples. So yeah, looks really good.
Yeah, and best of all, it'll tell you if you're doing something wrong. So if you include an associated type that's not
Whoa.
comparable, it will go ahead and tell you that's why you can't make it comparable. So A plus to Swift enums as always. My next tip will probably also be about Swift enums because I haven't been coding, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, A plus for me.
Nice.
Now it's time for mini review corner, where we oftentimes buy tech products that we didn't necessarily need in our lives, but we now have.
Indeed.
And in our case, okay, let me set the stage. We used to live in a small apartment, and therefore we bought a $40 microwave that fit because nothing fit in the small little kitchen. And we had a little microwave. A little later on, we heard John Siracusa of ATP and Hypercritical and all sorts of other podcasts talk about his favorite toaster oven, and it was a whole thing. If you've lived in tech during that time period, I think Cards Against Humanity sponsored ATP for like a year, just sending John toaster ovens to review to see if they were better than his favorite one. And they
That's
weren't,
awesome.
but it was very funny. And it culminated to on stage a Japanese toaster oven being shown that steams the bread. And we had a live demonstration. So at WWDC, distant past. So that was very funny. But needless to say, he had a favorite toaster oven. It was a Breville something. I forget exactly what. You can look up his thing on the internet. It's pretty popular. And we've had that because it matched our microwave for the longest time. In size, it didn't match in looks. Our microwave was the shittiest color of black and plastic compared to the very nice brushed stainless steel toaster oven, which we tried to keep in fairly good condition. And it still looks pretty new. Pro tip: do not use oven off in a Breville toaster. It turns out they have a non-stick coating on everything that makes cleaning it regularly easy. Now, of course, because I was putting mine away, I was like, I need to do a deep clean on this. There's some crusty oil that has not been regularly cleaned as suggested. So I did use oven off, and it totally took with it the nonstick finish. So it is now permanently oven off cleanable, because that's the only way to clean it at this point.
It has a stick finish now.
Yeah, you just have to use oven off, and it'll get rid of it every time. Including probably more and more material as you wipe it. Who knows exactly what that takes. Just spraying oven off, you get the fumes. Oh, it like burns your insides. That stuff cannot be safe. Use it outside in a windy area for all intents and purposes. So anyways, we had our little toaster oven. Now we recently have a baby, and we needed to sanitize bottles and stuff like that.
Oh,
And you
sure.
can either do this by boiling a pot of water every time, which not great, or you can get these cool little microwavable containers or bags and put them in the microwave. And that will just vaporize the water and cause the steam to sanitize everything. Seems fine in on paper. Turns out our microwave kind of small, so it doesn't fit any of the larger contraptions. Not even the bag fit. Like everything is just like scrunched. It was a mess. So we wanted to get a new microwave. Impressed with our Breville, we looked at Breville for microwaves, and we're like, oh yeah, this one seems very expensive, and we'll talk about it next week because we need more mini review corners. But that one's
There we
not
go.
as techy as the toaster oven. But bigger microwave meant that it no longer matched the setup, right? We had
Mhm.
we would have had a big microwave and a little toaster. So we're like, well, we were very impressed with our toaster oven for like 6 or 7 years now. Like, why don't we get a bigger one? Like treat ourselves a little bit. Against the wishes of my wife, I also in that same day ordered a toaster oven from Breville, also expensive. But this one was cool. It's the Breville Joule toaster oven, and it has a weirder name. It's the Air Fryer Pro or something. Joule Oven Air Fryer Pro. And it comes in a black finish. That's how you know it's pro.
Fancy.
So it costs more too, $50, I think.
No.
But the silver one was not available for in-store pickup, and I kind of just wanted to get it over with.
Sure.
So I got the black toaster oven and the silver microwave, and they totally don't match, but they were also much larger, so stacking them didn't make sense anymore. So different parts of the kitchen now, it kind of works out. But today I will be reviewing the toaster oven one, and this is once again the Joule registered trademark oven air fryer pro. And I was like, what's the Joule? And it turns out this was part of a company that they bought recently, Chef Master or something like that, that made a sous vide machine that was called the Joule. So this is the second Joule product, the an upgraded version of their existing oven air fryer pro. And this one has an app connected to it. It has the good old Wi-Fi's. I was wondering, why doesn't the microwave have the app? And I just realized microwaves and Wi-Fi's don't mix. So maybe that's the reason, but we'll get into that next week. Anyways, for this week, this toaster oven is very cool. It has 4 rack levels, and the racks, you can flip them to get like different heights because either it goes down or it goes up. So that's neat. The dials are all like clickety, and it feels good to use. So A+ on that. The cool part about this is it has a compatible app, which I think is just called the Joule app. And this app is actually well made for one of these connected smart devices.
Nice.
And it is essentially a recipe book with like 500 reasonably crafted recipes that are mostly all compatible with, you guessed it, this toaster oven. So it's basically there to teach you like techniques on cooking. Like if you don't already know like how to air fry something properly. Turns out you still need oil. Like oil is not out of the equation just because you're air frying. You can skip the oil and have bad food. That's totally a-okay. But you can also use oil and get really good food, and it won't be nearly as much oil that you're wasting in the cooking process.
Right.
Turns out when you deep fry stuff, not a lot of the oil sticks around in the food. That's a separate thing. Like you can get a lot, don't worry. Like it can be bad for you if you really wanted to. But most cases when you're deep frying something, the oil is just there to like remove moisture from the food. And then when you remove the food from the oil, most of the oil is still in the pot. Who'd have thunk? And like not a lot of it, again, it's possible to get a lot of it, but not a lot of it always sticks around with the food, or if you do it in a pan, yada yada. And air frying is just another technique of doing that using a lot less oil because you don't need to submerge it in the oil. You just need to coat it with oil, and then the air frying can do the rest.
Right.
That said, we have not used this as an air fryer yet. But we have used it as a regular toaster oven, and oh boy, were we missing out, because we did not have a convection oven ever before. And this cooks things very, very well, very, very consistently every time. And it cools itself down, which is super cool. So if you forget your, say, bagel bites,
Nice.
totally did not do this morning, for 7 minutes in the oven, it's not like they're going to continue cooking for 7 minutes. They will finish cooking, and that will stop, which is amazing. Like, you never think of a device to do that for you. You usually just kick yourself for having burned the bagel bites because you messed up. So this kind of saves you in that case. It, much like connected washing machines and dryers, will also notify you when the thing is done preheating, when the thing is done cooking. So if you don't hear the beeps because you're in a different room, your watch told you, hey, the toaster oven's done. And that will definitely help you not burn the bagel bites if you were not paying attention, because too many things were coming in at that exact moment in time. Having a child. So it turns out there's lots of chaos that happens. So it's kind of like the perfect thing that entered our life. So there's that aspect to it. As far as the app goes, it will give you like the recipe basically, right? And here are the ingredients, here are the steps. Step 1, preheat your oven. Press the button. The oven starts preheating. That is the most magical thing that a recipe app can do, right? It's just talking with your appliances and leaving you focus on reading what the recipe is, because frankly, you were supposed to read it before starting anything, but you didn't. And that is like the best way to kind of get that all working in unison. It also has some fancier modes where it will like have a cooking program for the exact thing that you're making that you can't replicate in any other way, which is a little weird. Maybe that will be something that the app will add down the line. This is, after all, their first fancy product that connects with it. So, and that's one thing. But for all intents and purposes, for what we've used it for so far, this has been excellent. Other things it does that I'm excited to try out, it can dehydrate, which is something that if you ever wanted to dry herbs or make certain types of sweets, like from fruits and stuff like that, something you can try that I just never would have tried in the past. So that's cool. You can have multiple racks in it at once. It's like large enough for that. It has a convection fan, as mentioned, which makes it the best air fryer according to like Wirecutter and those folks. Haven't tried air frying with it yet, but I will, I guess, let people know if it sucks. That's the promise I can give you. So far, I'm very happy with how this device turned out, and I get an excuse to talk about it on the show because it has a connected app, and therefore it's a tech product.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
As always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on mastodon.social at codecompletion to know when new episodes go live, and feel free to tweet at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we want to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who's at Spencer C. Curtis, that's SpencerCurtis, for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol. It's DimitryBounil, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Okay, now on to our main topic.
we are no longer an iOS podcast.
No, we are professional. We are professional adventurers in our own isekai.
Oh my gosh!
Adventure, and it turns out we're all in the same adventure because we are out to save the kingdom of Hyrule.
That's right.
But in an effort to guide us on this main topic of ours, I wanted to like focus on one thing in particular that will probably encompass probably everything we want to share that we've thought of so far, and that is like Nintendo. You don't make traditional Zeldas anymore. Like this game is not a good Zelda game.
Zelda.
It's not Zelda. and I think I want to discuss on how that is so wrong
Yeah.
on like so many different levels. I guess minor preface. We are going to try to not talk about like
Yeah.
story spoilers,
Yeah.
but we're going to be talking about like the gameplay aspects of it. So if you have not touched the game yet, now is your chance to pause this and go touch the game. And then once you kind of like touch the game for several
Dozens of
lifetimes of your
hours.
life, then you can come back to this, I guess.
Yeah.
And to preface, like I am like very not far along in the main storyline. I just kind of went and did my own thing. Spencer, I think you went quite far on the storyline, right?
Yeah, I kind of have been trying to pace it. I mean, I've done a ton of exploration as well, but there are some like good benefits you get from doing main storyline stuff.
Okay, so
Not in the traditional sense
you use
of
that
like,
information as far as like how spoiler we are going to be.
yeah,
Like we're trying not to spoil each other, but trying to
yeah,
like guide
exactly,
each other into like, oh, you
yeah,
should totally check this out. This was
yeah,
very cool. I'm not gonna tell
exactly,
you why, but that kind of thing.
yeah,
So yeah, spoiler warning over, I guess.
yeah.
How is this game not like
The
amazing?
same. Yeah, well, it's obviously it's not amazing because it's not linear and you don't get an item in every dungeon.
Hold up, Spencer. This non-linearness. I would like to have you know I could not get the hero's path that I really wanted and that I knew should be in the game because it was in the predecessor until I started on this main quest.
Oh,
So like I'd like to call some things on this linearity part.
okay.
Sure, it's not as linear as Skyward Sword, where it's like literally go
I
get the cat out,
freaking
or Twilight Princess. I think is the most infamous like one with the most drawn out initial like
yes.
tutorial section. I hesitate to say that. It's like, oh, get the
Yeah.
falcon, then save the cat, and then just do this and then do that. Herd the goats. Okay, gotta herd the
Herd the
goats a
goat. I
second
hate
time.
herding the goats, dude. The
Meh.
goats were the worst. Yeah.
um,
But I mean, it and Breath of the Wild are a very large departure from the traditional Zelda format, right? Where it's like got a bunch of dungeons, you get an item in the dungeon, you use the item to beat the dungeon, go to the last boss. Breath of the Wild is like, hey, do the tutorial section. You can go to the final boss right now. That's all. That's all good. Or you can not touch the final boss and let Zelda just hang out for 100 years, a little more than 100 years, and
100 more
go
years.
explore some shrines. Yeah, like whatever. It's all good.
The Link is out there collecting poop. I guess spoiler for Breath of the Wild. Their poop. But Link is out there collecting turds from little
From
tree
tree people.
sports. And they kind of basically tell you this at the beginning, but you're like, oh, this is special. But it's like it smells funny. They clearly tell you these are turds. And then at the very end, people are surprised that you get a turd out of collecting all the turds.
You get a big turd.
It's a
Yeah.
bigger tree spirit. Of course, he has a bigger turd. What did you expect?
Yeah, but okay, so like yeah, you're right, you're right. But let's like recap on Breath of the Wild where it became like one of the best games of all time, beating out the previous best game of all time, which was Ocarina of Time, more traditional Zelda game, right? So they've sort of changed the format to this
Significantly,
more,
right?
yeah, this more open world design where you're very free to just do whatever you want. You can go to the dungeons in any order and do them, and the same applies for Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom is basically the same format. You're in the same world as Breath of the Wild, just after the events of Breath of the Wild. But they've evolved the format, I suppose. Dimitri said something interesting. We were talking about it wow, that was today. Okay.
Who knows
Whatever. The
when?
days blur. We're both off work, so we don't know what time is anymore. We were just talking about, Breath of the Wild basically being ruined now after Tears of the Kingdom, and Breath of the Wild being the best game of all time, but
It
ranked
really
by
says
many
something to
people.
ruin the best game of all time.
Yeah, and then you said it was ruined into tech demo hood, and I was like, yes, that is exactly right. So,
And I stole that, to be clear. Like I've seen a
oh,
few other
okay,
people say that. That is by no means an original quote. But yeah, it feels like a tech demo at this point. Like
yeah,
there is no substance to the game once you compare it to Tears of the Kingdom. That said, I absolutely think if you have not, like, if you're listening to this and you have not played either and you're just like curious, go play Breath of the Wild first.
yeah. So
And not so that way, like, it will not be like ruined for you once you try Tears of the Kingdom. It is going to get you acclimated to Tears of the
that's
Kingdom
fair.
because Tears of the Kingdom adds a lot of layers on top of that, and I can definitely see it being overwhelming, like, significantly. And I say this with a wife who has not ever played like 3D games before, and me like trying to get her into playing Breath of the Wild. That was impossible just from the controls. Like
Yeah,
there was so much that she needed to learn about driving the character, like learning how to
it.
drive literally.
Yeah, isn't that
And
crazy? That like it seems I don't know second nature to me, and I'm not trying to
mhm,
belittle Lynn at all, but like a lot of like my parents and my sister were
it's
like that for a
impossible.
long time. It's like I have to move, but also control a camera at the same time. It's
hmm
like that's weird, right? Like I
And
take it for granted because I've been doing it my whole life.
in
But yeah,
retrospect, I should have started her off on Ocarina of Time. There's no camera control, right? It
fair.
was literally made for people who have never played a 3D game before. Like that was the
Because it
target
was the
audience.
first 3D game. Yeah.
Like one of the first. It wasn't the first, but it was like one of the first
Yes, I know.
that did it
The
in
first
this.
console,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Like,
So
yeah.
like that's what I probably should have started her on in terms of like learning to control characters, no matter how crappy it looked. Right,
Yeah.
but it had the ideas there to kind of guide people, and then once you have that down, it's like, oh, moving the camera, that's really cool, that's useful. I know how to move the character first, though. So it's
Yeah.
no longer like two things that I'm doing simultaneously. But talking about two things that I'm doing simultaneously, how many freaking times have you tried to like fuse a thing but then hit L and then like use the
Oh,
control
yeah.
stick, or
Yep.
like press the wrong button,
Try to
have the
rotate something.
yeah,
I'll like
all the time.
think
I'm
I'm
rotating
yeah.
something with R pressed, and I'm like, okay, I want to bring it closer to me now, but my finger's still pressed, so I'm like
Yeah.
down, and the thing rotates. I'm like, no, no, no,
Yep.
no, go back, and
Yep.
then there's a lot to like
There's a lot.
manage and do simultaneously, and it's going to be overwhelming. And this is someone who's played many, 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 many hours of video games in his lifetime.
Yeah.
So just want to put that out there. If you have played many, many hours of video games in your lifetime and you want to like try out a Zelda game, start with Breath of the Wild. It's
Yeah.
not a bad game
I
by any means. It
No,
is
it's amazing.
literally
It's
the best
amazing.
game that has been made up until
Yeah.
like 2017. So that's like an excellent way to start into like Zelda games. And then
Yeah.
if you follow that up with Tears of the Kingdom, you'll now realize what so many lovers of Zelda games were missing from Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, exactly. It brings back a ton of stuff, and there's like I think it's just such a cool combination because like Breath of the Wild was amazing, and because you're in the same world, you get a sense of nostalgia from this new format. But also, yeah, if you've played old Zelda games, brings back a lot of old enemies, and it makes Breath of the Wild it had like 4 variations of enemies, and that's about it, right? And it's like there's a lot
I don't,
more in.
I don't think that's fair, right?
Mm,
It greatly expanded how enemies can level up, right? Traditionally in Zelda games,
sure,
you had red enemies and blue enemies, and when I say traditionally, the
that's like
ancient
old
games,
school.
yeah,
Yeah,
pre Ocarina of Time, that was the system. You had red ones and blue ones, and then Ocarina of Time came along, and you no longer had that. You had small ones and big ones, I guess you could say, like
sure.
small Deku trees and not trees, Deku Babas and big Deku Babas, small Skulltulas and big Skulltulas. Like that was the only kind of variation. But Ocarina of Time did have a whole lot more enemies than Breath of the Wild. Like
Exactly.
Breath of the
There
Wild,
was
you
a
have
lot more
like your
variety.
Bokoblins, you have your Moblins, and you
Moblins
have
and
your Hinoxes, right? That's like one group.
sure,
Then you
yeah,
have
and
your
then you got the boss.
Lionels, and then you
The
have
Lizalfos.
Lizalfos.
Like
Um,
that's it though.
yeah.
And you're like, oh,
Yes,
and the
the
taluses.
taluses,
It's like, yeah.
and
But
then
there's, okay,
variations on those.
yeah, yeah. So there's like less than 8 or so kinds of enemies, and it Tears of the Kingdom ups that by a lot, and
In
it's great to
surprising
see.
ways, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about a few of them, please. You're just walking around, and then suddenly you hear a tree following you. It's like, what is going on? Why is the apple tree mad at me? I didn't even take its apples.
Yeah. And yeah. I mean, there's a lot to it. So my brother calls me randomly yesterday,
He also
and
playing?
he's like, "No," but his best friend is, and they were just sitting there, and he looked super pissed because his friend was just sitting there on the Switch playing Tears of the Kingdom, and he's like, "Hey." He wanted me to call just to see where you are in the game. He's like obsessed with the thing. He won't get off. And I was like, oh, kind of hard to say, whatever. And he's like, I haven't played Breath of the Wild. And I'm like, oh, dude, no, man. Like, cool. But yeah, I was like, I don't know if you want to play Breath of the Wild now. It's weird. It really does feel almost like a tech demo. It's a
Mm-hmm.
big tech demo, hundreds of hours, but uh, they've improved a lot. And it's just like, feels a lot more polished. I mean, what sucks is it's on the Switch, and so it kind of runs not awesome at times. You get like 15 frames per second in a couple places when there's a lot of particle effects going on, or you're carrying something, and it's like, this kind of sucks. I wish it was on better hardware, but it's like, I will absolutely overlook all of that because it's an amazing game. I just really want Nintendo to, one, stop being a terrible company, and two, to come out with better hardware, so I can play my game at least 1080 60. That would be just awesome. I've stopped playing it on my 4K TV because it looks like hot garbage. I'm now playing it on my monitor, so it doesn't look. I can't see the aliasing as much and stuff, and it's they're small little bummer pieces, but overall the game itself, if you ignore that, it's just like insane. I think we both logged many hours in the last few days already, and you know, there's so much to do. There's way more quests. Um, the To me, the world feels a lot more like full, and I guess like maybe that's what they were going for with Breath of the Wild, was just like it's sparse and there aren't a lot of people, but like this time it's like there's a bunch of people,
NPCs
and
everywhere.
yeah, and I what's funny is like I think I stopped, like Dimitri was talking about this one quest
Oh,
line where you
Addison.
build a town.
Oh,
Huh?
Terrytown.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, I just didn't do it, and I think I stopped talking to people because of everyone I talked to was like a Yiga clan. So I was like, I'm done with this. I'm done talking to people. I don't care anymore. And they're back in Tears of the Kingdom, but it's like there's a lot more people.
They can
So
be objects too. The info screen told me. It's
oh,
not
interesting.
limited to people. Objects can be Yiga clan members too, which I have not
Great.
run into yet.
No, I
But
haven't either.
the info screen told me, so I'm telling you.
Now I know.
Yeah,
So
said be careful. So
yeah, I can't even like sum up every like all of my experiences already in the last few days. Like there's a lot, and a lot of it's like spoilery too. But um,
if
it's
anything, I would say this is what Nintendo wished Ocarina of Time could have been. Like
sure,
this
yeah,
is the final state of that kind of game, right?
yeah,
Where you have complete freedom to actually explore and discover new things on your own. Whether you already know certain landmarks, like hey, you know there's a castle, you know there's a forest, you know there's
hmm
a Zora's Domain, you know there's a Goron City. Heck, you even know exactly where they are because you've been to those places. That takes
right,
away nothing from this game
yeah. It
because
doesn't feel reused, like
not at
hardly
all.
at all. It's crazy
If
because it's the
anything,
same world.
if anything, it just fades as the background canvas for all the new stuff. Because
Yep.
absolutely everywhere, assuming you're not just flying, which I have been doing a lot lately,
Yes, me too.
from point to point, if you are just like naturally walking through these environments, you're gonna get sidetracked so much because you're gonna
Yep.
look to your left and see like, ooh, a cave, and then you go to that cave, and out comes a giant flock of keys that you're always going to miss because they surprise the hell out of you. And then you go deeper in that cave, and then you realize the cave does not end. It just keeps going and going and going. And these are like the most perfect like representations of what grottos could have been in Ocarina of Time, you know, where they were something that you can discover, and you can get the damn rumble pack to tell you when you're close to them. And I won't say how, but there is a way for you to know where cave entrances are in the game. Like if you do a certain thing, then they will just pop up to tell you where all the entrances are. And boy, are there a lot of cave entrances. They are absolutely everywhere, whether they're hiding, whether they're in plain sight, and they go on for literally ever.
There's
There's one that you can discover where the starting point of the game is, right? And it literally goes all the way to the castle. But they didn't cheat how that distance is. It's that full distance to the castle, but underground in caves. So you are wandering around for hours in that cave system, finding all sorts of different things, enemies, like things that are out in the world, and it just brings back that wonder of discovery that Breath of the Wild kind of pioneered in a way. And it just makes it feel fresh again, even though you already know where everything is, right? I very recently started playing a little bit of Breath of the Wild recently, so I knew exactly where Hateno Village was and where Kakariko Village was, but I could not for the life of me get there anytime like until recently, because there were so many things that just sapped my attention away from wanting to go like visit Link's house, which you should definitely go visit if you haven't. There are implications. It was definitely Link's house. There were definitely armor displays on the wall. It was a man cavey of a man house in every way possible. I'll let you sit with that until you go visit it on your own. Like even little things like that, like I couldn't even get to. Like that, I told Spencer, this is the list of things I want to do. I want to go visit Link's house. I want to go visit the Shrine of Resurrection. I want to go visit Terrytown. I did 2 of those things. I did not visit Terrytown yet. But it took me forever to do those 2 things because there is just so much like vying for your attention as you walk around, as you learn about the story. Like there's way more of a story this time than Breath of the Wild. Like it's from the very beginning. You have 30 minutes of exposition to kind of get you in the mindset of why everything is in the way it is. And that kind of sets you up for why all the NPCs behave the way they do, why the world itself is so different than it was. Like, what caused those changes? Well, you're going to be handheld through that process at the beginning. You're going to realize that Link was quite powerful. You're going to learn about all the things he could do. When he had 3 wheels of stamina and you can run around like a lunatic and then have that quickly taken away from you.
So they did a good job of like bringing you back to 0. I was like, okay, that's clever. It was good.
Fun thing that the day 1 patch did that the early like the non-patch versions did not. At the beginning of the game, when you had your 30 hearts, it used the 40 width, so you had 1.5 lines of hearts. But then the day 1 patch fixed that, so you have 2 lines of 30.
2 20s.
Or 2 15s.
Or 15, yeah.
Yeah, so like that's another thing, I guess spoiler. You can have 40 hearts. You quickly realize as you start accumulating them and you get your yellow hearts that the line is much longer than it was.
Definitely.
In Breath of the Wild. So that like there's just so much that they expanded on. And it makes it feel so fresh to play. And it is all in ways that previous Zelda games have done, right? There's more collectibles. There's more things that you can explore in individual ways. You have a better way of tracking what people are doing and like following up with that, kind of like Majora's Mask. You have islands to explore, like Wind Waker. There are even treasure maps, though I've
Yeah.
only found one of them,
Yeah.
that like you can go hunting for. It's like the best parts of every Zelda game up until this point, without the freaking collecting light spirits, whatever that
That
I
was yeah.
hate. Um,
With things chasing you,
oh
kind of.
gosh,
Yeah.
like I guess they brought back that too. You have anxiety piano
Yeah.
with
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the guardians chasing you. Um, Floor masters are back, and that is something
Terrifying.
that is absolutely freaking terrifying and gets my heart racing every single time because the music changes. It's a blood moon in the middle of the freaking day, and there's no
They're
outrunning it.
fast,
They are
dude.
freaking fast. If you don't have a plan of action, knowing that they're there, they are so fast.
Yeah.
How did you not run into any of these until I told you about them?
I don't know, dude. And then I started running into them all the time,
They are
but
everywhere.
they are everywhere.
It's like absolutely
um,
terrifying.
I got like a at least 12-hour head start on Dimitri, probably. 12 hours of gameplay,
You have much more than
probably.
that because I have been not playing 24/7.
No, I know. I'm just saying at the start, and
Hmm.
somehow I never ran into them. I wanted to mention I was watching a video that came out like a week ago called How Nintendo Solved Zelda's Open World Problem. And it talks about the way that they designed Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's world. It's super interesting, and it sort of goes along with what you were saying about you get distracted all the time. And really well designed if this is actually sort of their thought process behind it. So check it out. It's like 10 minutes long.
So on the topic of that video, because I did watch that,
Oh, okay, cool.
the thing that immediately jumped to mind is spoiler alert: there is a dark world in this game, much like a lot of the previous Zelda titles.
Yeah.
Pre 3D, right? The dark world didn't really make a comeback in the 3D scene
Yeah.
until now. I guess a
Yeah.
Link Between Worlds,
Yes, the DS one.
the 3DS one, that one had a
Yeah.
dark world, but that was basically the um, not Link's Awakening, a Link to the Past's world, right? It's a sequel.
Yeah.
It's reusing the same map. Who'd have thunk that it'd still work? So the entirety of Hyrule has a basement, and I hesitate to call it a basement because it is much more filled than you'd think,
Yes.
with stuff to explore and
Yeah.
do.
And you're
But
like,
there
I mean,
aren't those
that's
like mountains like as he
yes.
was explaining in the video, to kind of keep you from going point to point because you can't see anything down there. And when I say it's pitch
Yeah.
black, you
It's
are hundreds of meters below the ground, and they make you realize that very quickly. Like it feels
yeah.
like you are in the depths. It's not like there's lingering light. There's no light. You
Yeah.
have to make the light if you want it. And the only thing you can see in the distance are this faint glow of the light roots. And that's what I ended up doing is going point to point to those light roots
Oh yeah.
because you can't see anything else. You have no other direction. You have no other pointers of where you want to go other than that straight line.
I need
Because
some light.
yeah, there's nothing else you can do.
Yeah.
Like the moment I diverged from that straight line, I had no idea where I was anymore. And that's why I wanted the Hero's freaking path so much. Because I felt like I was just going
Yeah.
in circles. Because there's like so few landmarks that you can recognize because everything is so dark. And finally, like after exploring it a while, you start to build up a mental
Yeah.
map of where things are. But oh boy, is it a big mental map that is not at all what I was expecting or
No.
what Nintendo kind of previewed. Like they just it is very Nintendo to like keep this under wraps and just like not talk about it until the game comes out and be like, oh yeah, we have a entire second map. Like, oh, those Sky Islands, oh, don't worry about those. There's the depths.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because Breath of the Wild's map is huge, just the main overworld, right?
Mhm.
And then they've effectively doubled it between the depths and the Sky Islands, which is just like
I would say more than doubled it. I would say the depths they doubled
probably.
it, and then the caves plus Sky Islands they probably
Oh, good
tripled
point.
it.
Yeah,
Because the
that's
caves
true.
are in between Hyrule and the depths. They are not anywhere close to the depths, but they are like a fully explorable thing that's basically every area that you're around has a full cave system that you can really explore. And yes, it's smaller, just like the Sky Islands above. Yes, they are smaller. They don't take up the large expanse, right? But there's a whole bunch of verticality puzzles involved with it. Like, you can enter in a cave, enter into a cavern, and be like, well, there's nothing else to explore here. You turn around, now there's two entrances. Like, which one did I come from? I don't even remember which one I came from at that point, because you didn't realize there were two entrances to it, and that's how you kind of lose even more time like exploring that. So good.
It's amazing.
What are your feelings regarding the memories that have been shown so far? So, spoilers, I guess. Memories are back with Tears of the Kingdom. They are different than Link's memories because they are not Link's memories this time around. They are kind of things that have been left for you to discover. And once again, you need to piece the story together little by little. Though it does give you some guidance as far as where these are and how to find them without needing to like actually fall back on a mental map of you actually discovering the place, which was quite satisfying when it worked, but then frustrating when it didn't, right? Like when you see the picture and be like, I just explored this, I know exactly where this is. That was like the most satisfying discovery. But it's like, where's this final freaking memory? You can never find it. That was frustrating. So this kind of gets rid of the wonder of that whole process and makes it a whole lot more handholdy, because you can basically from the 10th hour go and discover all of these if you wanted to, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I've got a train in the background. Yeah, I think overall, what I enjoy the most about comparing Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild is there is a lot more story. That was another thing that felt a little, now comparing it, tech demo-y, where Breath of the Wild was like, I compare it to like the FromSoft like Dark Souls and Elden Ring lore, because it's like it's very like you kind of have to look for it yourself, and it's not. Yeah, it's very environmental, and not much is sort of given to you. Whereas Tears of the Kingdom, honestly, I feel like it fits the format a little bit better to give you a little bit more, where it comes from the NPCs, the storyline itself, and the memories as well. It just feels a little bit meatier, which I like. So it like, I think for both of us, as soon as we saw a couple of the memories, we're like,
Gotta collect them
okay,
all.
we're gonna go hunt all of them. We're like, in either of my 2 or 3 playthroughs of Breath of the Wild, I never got all the memories because like I don't care about the armor. It's whatever. It's not worth it to me. So,
But the
and the
secret
memories weren't
memory
satisfying themselves.
and the
I don't even
secret
know about the
ending,
secret memory. I don't even know.
they showed it off in the
But
trailer.
okay. Anyway, it's good. Yeah, like the memories are good, and the overall storyline just is a lot meatier, which is great because it just feels not as like barren of a like I am completely alone in this world with a bunch of Yiga clan people, and that's all.
Poor
Yeah,
Spencer. What has the Yiga clan done to you, Spencer?
dude. I just like I'm gonna stop talking to people. I hate this. This is the worst. So they're gonna break all my weapons and give me some bananas in return. Not worth.
I guess excellent
So
segue into another thing that this game iterates on, and that is the infinite weapon durability. In Breath of the Wild, it was necessary. Otherwise, you wouldn't go exploring anything if you didn't have
yeah,
something that you needed. And that something that you needed was something you were always low on, and that was weapons. Until the very end game, once you discovered everything, that's when you'd essentially start accumulating weapons up your Gazoo, and then you're just like, okay, now I need Quark Seeds to make slots for all these good weapons I
yeah,
don't want to use. Tears of the Kingdom, very much at the beginning, is like, well, you have your fundamental weapon types. Doesn't matter how strong they are. And you have your fundamental weapon tips. Very much matters how strong those are.
yeah, yeah.
And you can combine them. And therefore, the first few hours of play, I had a full inventory of rock clubs to just like destroy every rock I found with. and that
Yeah.
was my build, so to speak. It was the rock club, or it was half rock clubs and half long sticks, um,
Yes.
because those are definitely fun to run around with. Um, so
I love it. I love, yeah, just being able to like have something twice as tall as you are sticking out of your back.
as you run at full speed.
It's awesome. Yeah, they've and that I think that was a big pain point for everyone in Breath of the Wild. It's like this sucks finding weapons and stuff. And I mean, it's still there, but it's mitigated quite a bit. Where
Yeah.
it's definitely
I have never been
manageable.
I have never been without a weapon. I have never been sad to lose one because
Yeah,
they're all shit. So I don't
yeah,
really mind losing one or two or most of them. I'm like, please get rid of these so I can make some room for the better ones.
yeah.
Um,
That's true.
and I have never run out of arrows. Like I have 600 plus
I
arrows
haven't.
at this point.
Oh,
And that's because I'm breaking every crate with my rock clubs. Uh,
I
Everyone has arrows in
interesting.
them. Every
I
crate,
Yeah,
every
no, I
box you
know.
see is like a bundle of 5 arrows.
So until you said something, I was all like when I was in the depths, I would always use arrows for bright bloom seeds. I
Oh,
forgot that you can throw
never
things.
use arrows. I always ran out of arrows in Breath of the Wild. Those are a precious resource. I
I
now have too
know. So
many of
like
them.
until you mentioned in Slack that you could throw the seeds, I was like, "Oh, that yeah, I should do that." So I haven't run out since, but I was running out because I'd be in the depths and just be shooting seeds so I could freaking see. Yeah, no. Now I'm like, "Oh, I will just throw them."
Yeah,
So, yeah.
talking about seeds, I have like hundreds of those.
Yeah,
I am overstocked on almost everything except rupees. I have no rupees.
but you know what's awesome though is like you'll actually use the items, and
Oh,
that's like for
definitely.
crafting. I was like, I'm never gonna use any of these monster parts. I don't make elixirs that often, so. But now you're like, yeah, I'll just like throw this horn on a sword and make a better sword. It's pretty cool. It's a good system.
Oh man, it's harsh because this game hits much harder than Breath of the Wild. I would say, like unless you know exactly the enemy patterns, you are going to be wrecked. And
Oh
then
yeah,
existing enemies,
it's
guess what? New patterns. When they start shaking their head like crazy, I don't know what to do. They hit me every time and they murder me.
yeah,
Absolutely every single time.
it's
I
like you
It's
start
so
on
hard.
master mode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think they
it's
have
funny.
that one hit protection in this game. Though, actually, no,
Probably
I
not.
take that back. They do have it because I didn't notice this until I got more hearts. Getting more hearts was useless. Like they don't help you at all. As I,
Armor is yeah.
yeah, you need to get better armor. You need to do the musician thing. Like I guess other spoilers. The
Yeah.
great fairies. They are in plain sight. They're very easy to find this time around. They are not so happy to help you.
Yeah.
It's not a question of rupees. I was like, I found a fairy. I don't even have 100 rupees. What is she gonna tell me? She's like, oh, I need a musician. And I'm like, woof. I don't have rupees. I don't have a musician either. But this makes me feel a little better. Um,
Yeah.
so like new variations on all that.
And it's fresh, and that's I
Yeah.
think the biggest thing is like it's they're reusing things, but like not in like a tiring way where you're like, this is the same game.
Hmm.
Like it's a completely fresh experience,
Yeah.
which is awesome. So
Heck, fairy fountains are back. Not the great fairy fountains, the minor ones, just in the sky. You have random
yeah,
ponds full of fairies.
yeah.
And they are impossible to catch as always because they're floating way up here and you are
I know.
crouching, waiting for them
You
patiently.
just sit there and wait. Like, come on, just come down, please. Or they're in the middle of the pond. You're like, what am I supposed to do?
Ah,
Yeah,
long gone are the days of Ocarina of Time where you just run in and they just envelop you. Ah,
yeah,
long gone. At least they're not fugly fairies, right?
yeah,
I hated the fugly fairies from Majora's Mask
yeah,
and from Wind
yeah.
Waker. It's like, what did you do? These were like so perfect, and then you
It's
ruined
just
them.
so
I'm
90s,
I'm
dude. Yeah,
so glad they brought back the OG fairy from Ocarina of Time for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
yeah,
And they're just as useless. Like once you have like a million hearts, they don't really restore anything.
yeah.
But they still got your back, and that's all that's important. Especially when you're like, just kill me anyways. No, just stop using all my fairies. I just want to die and restart this experience.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So
So
good. So
So good. Play it for sure.
definitely.
It's contender for my favorite game of all time for sure.
Yeah, and it's already been like speedrunnable stuff has been happening. I don't know
Yeah.
if you
I saw
saw.
someone beat it in 94 minutes. That was the last thing I saw.
Yeah,
It's
and
like
there are a few glitches that have been found. Like you can duplicate items.
nice.
You can fly a little faster with the little gale thing that you get.
Hmm.
I guess gale thing that you get dungeons. A lot of people are saying Breath of the Wild did not have dungeons. They had divine beasts and they sucked. And Tears of the Kingdom also does not have dungeons. It
Yeah,
has
it's the same thing.
it has basically divine beasts.
Temples.
So
Yeah.
let's. I want to talk about this a little bit because I think this is an evolution of what we considered a dungeon. Because the dungeon is no longer just the building that you enter
Yeah.
to solve the puzzles. The entire
Yeah.
area is the dungeon leading
Yeah.
up to
They're
that building.
yeah.
And that building, I would say, is the final room before the boss room where you need to do the final things to get to the boss. Everything before that is the dungeon. That
Yeah.
linear mental model of like figuring out things and perhaps backtracking and collecting the things that you need to finally
Hmm.
go into the final area to beat the boss. The final
Yeah.
area does not have any of the things that we think of in dungeons where you need to collect small keys, you need to backtrack, you need to do all these
Right.
things because the rest of the environment did that. So it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to like place that additional mental burden. And I think that's what a lot of Zelda fans really miss is that poetic idea of like a building that has
Yeah.
all those
Sure. Yeah.
aspects. But they are kind of missing the trees for the weeds or whatever the expression is because that whole environment before that did that. Like
Yeah.
it
It
fulfilled
like
that duty.
yeah. The dungeon starts as soon as basically that quest starts, and
Hmm.
you have that whole chain of events. I can see that for sure.
Yeah, it much more leaks into its environment than you would
Yeah.
expect. And the fact that they did that in such a way that no one recognized it meant they did an excellent job at
Hmm.
that. It's just they didn't satisfy what people thought they wanted, which is like
Yeah.
the. Take what everyone was complaining about the dungeons. No one really said, "Oh, I wanted a really linear, like experience of discovering a dungeon," which is what Zelda dungeons have always been. They're super linear,
Right.
but you don't
Yep.
realize they're linear because they're twisted and turned in such a way where like the only way to make progress is to find this key and then you go back to this point and then unlock a door and then you didn't have a choice between which doors to unlock. You had one door that needed to be unlocked, but it was not in the same area where the key was, so it's like it didn't feel linear, but it was linear. No one
Yeah.
was asking for that. Everyone was asking, "Hey, I want themed places with their own music that felt unique in some way," and that's what we
Hmm.
got with Tears of the Kingdom. Like
Yeah.
they listened to that feedback,
The
and a lot of
yeah.
people are still not happy about that. They're like, "Well, that still doesn't feel like a dungeon because they don't know how to put to words that they wanted that linear experience back in a way."
Yeah.
Which
The lead up is fun.
yeah,
Like there's a couple of them out of the four that are like really really cool. So
I mean, heck, the whole climb for the first one that you're encouraged to do, because
that's yeah,
they do
exactly.
encourage you to do these in a certain order, just like in Breath of the Wild. I don't know how many of you started with the divine beasts in the desert. No one did. Guess what?
Yeah,
That's the
that's
easiest
true.
one
That
to
was
do
my last one.
first because doing that one last makes it the hardest. Because it turns out the divine beasts, not the divine beasts,
The enemies scale.
the calamities, they scale as you beat the other ones, so they get harder and harder
Yeah.
and harder. And Thunderblight is the
Is the
hardest
hardest.
one when it's scaled
Yeah.
all the way up. But if you do it the first time, no one has any problem. But no one does that one the first time because guess what?
Yeah.
You are not led in that direction. You're led towards Kakariko Village, and then you're led to Hateno. And then guess what's over there? The Zora's Domain. So then you do
Zora.
that, and
Yep.
then you do Eldin, and then you do the Wind one, and then you do the Electricity one.
Yeah.
So like it's open, but they lead you in that direction without you realizing it, and everyone goes down that same kind of path. In this case, they're heavily leading you towards the Rito. They're like, hey, you should go check out that giant cloud. Oh, it's really cold. The Rito are suffering. Yada, yada, yada. They want you to go towards the Rito. And I'm like, I know better. I don't want to do this. I want to get my hero's path so I can better explore these caves and depths. Better. And it won't let me do that. And that kind of made me mad a little bit because it was forcing linearity when it didn't need to.
That's fair.
But that's what you get when you want a story, because you can't have a story and a true like open world of let the player do whatever they want, because then it's like there's so many permutations of what the user could have done that you as a developer can't control for, and therefore it's a nightmare to like draft something out that can work. So that's like what they're contending with. So I get that certain parts need to be linear. The fact that I can just go explore everything, that's totally fine. Like I was hoping for such a minor thing that I knew had to exist because the previous one had it, but was like totally inconsequential towards the progress of the game.
Sure.
Like the thing that I'm nitpicking is like not important at all. It was just me trying to push the limits of knowing how this whole thing was framed to begin with. And for all intents and purposes, they are doing an excellent job guiding the user. It's like, hey, you can do the Rito thing, but you can also do these other 3 things, or maybe this one extra 4th thing, or 5th thing, I should say. And all of those things are available to you. You just have to start one, basically, and you can make the rest of the progress. Like, we want to hold your hand through one of these experiences, so that way you know what to expect from the other ones. And doing that first one, like getting there is one thing, whether you walked it, whether you flied through, like that's up to you. Walking it, you'll probably have gone too distracted to make progress, which is what happened to me. I'm like told Spencer 4 times I'm finally making progress towards Hebrew. And it just kept not happening because I kept finding different things and getting distracted, namely by grabby hands. Which kept popping up and tormenting me. So, like you get to that place and then they basically give you some more story exposition and then you're off on the adventure to do it. In Breath of the Wild, it was climbing through this mountain full of rain that you can't climb on. So you're limited to the path and figuring out how to scale that path, which once again is linear. In this case, it's you need to climb the mountain and then get to an ever-climbing set of islands that lead up to the top of the cloud that you need to get to. And that is all linear as well. There's like very few ways to get through, but it makes you feel like, okay, where do I need to go next? Oh, if I do this one, then maybe that's a path forward. And you feel like a genius for figuring it out when that was the path forward that's the one they were leading you towards. That's like all I really want to say is all of that was the dungeon. You just didn't realize it. Because Nintendo did such a good job blending those 2 things together. And if you find yourself you didn't enjoy it because it wasn't a traditional Zelda, did you not enjoy it at all, or were you just comparing it to that experience? Right. At the end of the day, that was really fun climbing those islands to get to the very top of that, and then finally getting to a freaking flying ship sure, you get to there and it's like, here are the objectives, and then you need to go do those 5 things. Fine. Like, but you can do those at any order, right? And you can go do it with a companion, which is new in this game, reminiscent of Wind Waker, right? That was the last real time that you really had like a companion through a dungeon like this. It doesn't take hours of your life to get through. Like this is something you can do in one sitting, which in today's day and age, that I'm thankful for that, honestly. I don't want to be in a dungeon for 1 month straight. Though I guess kids
forget where you
would
are
want a different experience out of that. So who knows there? They can be in a cave system for 1 month straight. That's for them. And you get to the point and there's a final boss and the boss is unique and it doesn't look like the other bosses, and you're good. And then you get to the Goron area and you're immediately met with this boss looking thing that turns out it's just like a fun roller coaster ride to to
Yeah.
figure out how to do it. But it makes you feel like you're fighting the boss from the beginning. And I haven't gone further from there, so I can't speak to how that has changed. But like A+ from the Zelda team, kind of listening to feedback and bringing back, like, there are going to be tons of people that experience this as their first Zelda game or second
Yeah.
Zelda game.
Yeah. Sure.
And no one's going to really get all the references that are being like put in play.
Yeah.
There are so
Yeah.
many callbacks
So good though.
in mechanics alone to past
Yes.
games. And that is the part that just makes me as a Zelda fan super, super happy to see. Like, it was super nice getting Breath of the Wild where everything was fresh and new, but it has been so nice seeing all these callbacks to things that I grew up with and loved, like down to Link cooking food and then singing Ocarina of Time tunes or tunes from other Zelda games as well. Like while he's cooking, it's like I'm not skipping it anymore because I want to listen to all
exactly.
of them. So like all of that is so nice.
Yep. Go play it. It's good. It's really, really good.
Yeah. Spencer's meanwhile typing to me to shut up so that way we can
No,
get back to continue our adventure.
No, you're good. It's good to take a break. I've been playing it a freaking lot. So
what is next on your to-do list? What are you going to explore next?
I don't know, dude. I've kind of been like neglecting a lot of quests. Like I'll like anytime I see a shrine, I'll go do it. So I've got a lot of shrines and stuff done, but probably go do some quests. Maybe I was thinking about finally like just going on like a boss rush to get more parts for armor and stuff. So that's probably what I'm going to be doing. Because the armor's lacking and I feel it.
So I feel it in my bones.
Yeah.
They be cracking.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Can't wait.
Yep. It's good. So.
Okay. Bye, everyone.